Here to tell us about his campaign in Parliament and forcing the government U-turn on child refugees is former child refugee himself. Please give a very warm welcome to Labour peer Lord Dubs.
Thank you very much. Look, it's not a personal thing. I did it, and it got more publicity than I ever thought it would get. And I was told that the more publicity we get for the cause, the more pressure we put on the government. So, I'm not automatically a publicity seeker, so please don't think... But anyway, I'll start with what I'm going to say. First of all, I think it's a terrific occasion. Thank you for inviting me, and I think it's great to see people here. I think solidarity is what we need, because we're facing enemies, people who are against us, and the more solidarity we express to each other, the more we can continue fighting for what we think is right. So I'm just going to say a little bit about what happened, because I'm still surprised by it. Maybe I should have seen it coming, but it didn't come. Anyway, what happened was the immigration bill was starting its passage through Parliament. By the way, I used to be head of the Refugee Council, so I've been involved with refugees a long time. This is not something I've just discovered in the last little while. And I was at the Refugee Council when we helped to facilitate 4,000 Bosnians coming to Britain some years ago. And I was also on a local council in Westminster when we voted to give Uganda Asians housing. So I've been involved with a few of these issues. They're difficult sometimes, not always popular, but they matter. Anyway, Save the Children produced a report which said that there were 26,000 unaccompanied child refugees in Europe. Well, actually, that turned out to be an underestimate, and there were actually 95,000, okay? Anyway, so I put down an amendment saying they should bring... I'm going to explain this in a little bit of detail because there's some confusion. And I put down an amendment saying we should take 3,000 unaccompanied child refugees. Now, the government were not keen on this. I said from Europe. They said, oh, no, we'll take some more from the region. We don't want anybody from Europe. And we felt, on the evidence, that there were these young people sleeping rough. 10,000 of them had just disappeared. And isn't that shocking that children should just disappear in Europe? Some of them were in Calais, some were in Greece and Italy and so on. And we felt that their need was enormous. And the government then said, well, if you take children from Europe, that'll attract more to come. So I said, well, first of all, there's no evidence for that. And secondly, set against the dire situation in which some of these young people are, the possibility that a few more will arrive in Europe, frankly, is neither here nor there. And the much more important thing is we must do something now. If we'd gone with what the government wanted, then nothing would have been done at all. And, I've all along said that the 20,000 scheme over 5 years from Turkey and so on is far too small. It's all right, but it's far too small. So we're dealing with that sort of situation. Now, what amazed me, and what I think helped to get this thing through, apart from the efforts by a lot of NGOs, was public support. Normally, when you open your mouth about immigration or refugees, you expect a lot of abusive things. Well, sometimes you get abusive things. I hardly got any at all. I did have one letter which said, you want these children to come, they'll all become terrorists like you. So I thought, and then came the day when the Daily Mail, I can't believe this, the Daily Mail, which is anti-refugees, came out in support of the child refugees. And I was so astonished, I bought a Daily Mail for the first time in my life. See? I wanted a souvenir copy because, nobody otherwise would believe it. So that's what happened. Anyway, the amendment got through the Lords. By the way, let's be clear. I think the Lords should be elected. I don't like unelected chambers, but that's for another day. But the Lords passed it. Now, in the course of this, the media were talking a bit about that I was a refugee. Well, I wouldn't normally have started with that, but in the end I realised it was helpful to the cause because it pushed the government more into a corner. Anyway, the amendment got to the Commons, and the government were desperate to stop it. We thought there'd be more Conservative MPs backing us, but some of them who said they'd be with us dithered a bit. I was told to sit in the gallery looking at the Tory benches and give them the eye. Well, I did give them the eye. I sat there, because I saw some of them, and the speaker nodded to me because he saw me sitting up there. Well, this is all politics, isn't it? So I gave them the eye, and one who dithered And so there was a small majority again. So it came back to the Commons. Now, it got a bit complicated. The original amendment said 3,000. But for reasons, I don't know whether you want a boring stuff about the British Constitution, but there's something called financial privilege. And God, it's awful, but you need... I'm going to tell you anyway, can I? So, anyway, the financial privilege means that if they think something the Lord puts back to the Commons is involving expenditure, which of course everything does, then the clerks can say it's financial privilege, and then you have to, you can't do that quite. And the government decided they'd call it financial privilege after the clerks advised them. So it came back to us, so we dropped the 3,000 figure. Okay, that meant they couldn't put any money to it. But the sentiment was there, and we added the idea the government should actually start talking to local authorities quickly. Okay? Now, that amendment was then on its way to the Commons, by which time we'd taken more soundings, and there was a pretty good chance the government were going to lose. We had more people coming, they realised what was happening. Even some of the people who did it when I gave them the eye said they were not going to come around. And so the government backed off, and I had the pleasure of seeing the Commons order paper with Theresa May's name on the amendment, which, chuffed me a bit anyway. But look, there's some more issues about this. We're talking about child refugees, and I'll talk about Calais in a second, but these are very important issues. But what is important is that in addition to talking about child refugees, we've got to get rid of the stigma attached to the idea of anybody being a refugee. I was brought up, refugees are people who are fleeing from safety. They're covered by United Nations conventions, and surely it is right that we say refugees have certain rights and we have to stick by them. And one right is that we shouldn't stigmatise them. So I hope that the result of this little effort by me will also help to improve the attitude towards refugees in Britain. That's important, and that's of course what you're about here, which is why I applaud what you're doing, and I think it's absolutely terrific. Just a few quick thoughts. I then went to Calais with some of the NGOs, I think 10 days ago, and I met a lot of people there. Now, some of you have been to Calais. It's both shocking and exhilarating. It's shocking that people are in such conditions. It is exhilarating because it shows the triumph of the human spirit over such adversity, that these people are making the best of it in the hope of getting here. The French aren't very welcoming to refugees. We're slightly better, I'm told. Anyway, so I met 9 of these kids. They're all Afghan kids, and some of them had a long journey, and the NGOs gave me full documentation about each of them. And some of them didn't know whether they had any parents alive. Some might have had one parent, but they were basically on their own. And I took the documentation with me, and I sent copies of it to the Home Office and said, look, if these amendments mean anything, then it must mean that these are people on your list. Well, I've since discovered that 4 of them got to Britain anyway. They made it on the back of a truck. Now, I think, sort of... first of all, I would prefer them to come properly because it's a dangerous thing. So 1 or 2 kids have got killed, but the fact is they made it here. So there are only 5 on the list to the Home Office now, as opposed to the original 4. Now look, okay, I'm going to be ever so quick. Just what can we do apart from showing solidarity with refugees? Could you do a few things? If there are local groups, throw your effort into them, and there are local groups springing up supporting refugees. Secondly, bring pressure to bear on local authorities, because local authorities need to help and find foster parents. I've had letters of people wanting to be foster parents. Press local authorities. Get local publicity for what we're about, for this sort of meeting, and what you do locally. And get onto your MPs and say they need to press the Home Office to move faster. What we're seeking to do is to get the kids over as many as possible in September for the beginning of the school term. And we're pushing. So if you could help and push on all these issues, but above all, let's remember the cause is some very vulnerable young people, but the cause is also making refugees not a dirty word, but people who we welcome, along with other European countries, people we welcome, because this is a matter of fundamental human rights. And thank you for your help and support.